The axe bit into the oak with a clean, solid sound, and Kieran Harding wiped sweat from his brow before positioning another piece on the stump. His hands found their familiar places on the worn handle, shoulders squared, feet planted just so. He had split wood every autumn for 15 years, first for his parents and now for himself, and the rhythm of it lived in his bones. "You are doing it wrong." The voice came from directly behind him, low and certain, and before he could turn a body pressed against his back, green-skinned arms reaching around to bracket his own. Strong hands covered his grip, adjusting fingers that did not need adjusting. "Your left hand is too high," she said, her breath warm against his ear. "And you are choking the handle with your right, like this." She shifted his hands perhaps half an inch, a correction so minor it would make no difference to the cut. The axe had been splitting wood perfectly well for the past hour. Kieran stood very still, acutely aware of the solid warmth along his spine, the faint scent of pine sap and clean sweat, the careful way she was not quite explaining what she claimed to be fixing. "I see," he said, his voice coming out steadier than he felt. "Thank you." She stepped back, and the autumn air felt suddenly cold where she had been. Kieran turned to find an orc woman watching him with dark eyes that held something between amusement and challenge. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, her build athletic beneath travel-worn clothes, her black hair pulled back in a practical braid. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were just visible through wisps of hair that had escaped the plate. "Much better form now," she said, perfectly serious except for the slight quirk at the corner of her mouth. Kieran glanced down at his hands, still positioned exactly as they had been before her intervention. "I appreciate the instruction. You are welcome." She shouldered the pack she had set down, though she made no move to leave. "I am Asha Vex, Kieran Harding." He set the axe down, wiping his palm on his trousers before offering his hand. Her grip was firm and calloused. "Are you passing through Millbrook?" "I was," she said. "But I may stay a few days. There is good timber in these woods. You are a woodcutter, among other things." She looked past him to the neat stacks of split wood, the organized chaos of his small yard behind the schoolhouse. "You have a lot of firewood for one man." "The school needs it," Kieran said, gesturing to the low stone building. 20 children get cold quickly when winter comes." Something shifted in her expression, interest sharpening. "You teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, a bit of natural philosophy when I can make it interesting." He smiled. "Though apparently my woodcutting technique needs work." "Terrible," she agreed, solemn. "The worst I have seen." They stood there in the slanting afternoon light, neither quite willing to end the conversation. A leaf drifted down between them, yellow gold against the darkening sky. "There is an inn," Kieran said finally. "The Grouse and Kettle. Mistress Carlyle keeps clean rooms and sets a good table. I will find it." Asha adjusted her pack. "Perhaps I will see you again, Kieran Harding. Perhaps." He watched her walk away down the dirt road toward the village center, her stride long and easy. Only when she disappeared around the bend did he pick up the axe again, his hands falling into exactly the same grip they had always used. The wood split clean and true, the same as it had all afternoon. The next morning brought the first real bite of cold, frost painting the windows of the schoolhouse white. Kieran arrived early as always to build up the fire, setting the kettle on for tea and arranging slates on the rough-hewn desks. The children would arrive within the hour, stamping feet and blowing on fingers, their breath making clouds in the autumn air. He was reviewing the day's mathematics problems when footsteps crunched on the frost outside. Too heavy for a child, too early for a parent. Kieran looked up as the door opened. Asha ducked through the frame, though she had inches to spare. She carried an armload of kindling, neatly bundled and tied. "You will need more than what you have," she said by way of greeting. "The smoke from your chimney is thin. You are rationing wood already." "Good morning to you as well." Kieran came around the desk, surprised and inexplicably pleased to see her. "I did not expect you this early. Woodcutters start at dawn." She set the kindling by the hearth. "I saw your smoke, or the lack of it. Winter will be hard this year. The birch bark is thick and the squirrels are frantic. Old weather wisdom, true weather wisdom." She glanced around the single room that served as classroom and his living space both. The cot in the corner was neatly made, his few possessions organized with military precision. Books lined a makeshift shelf, their spines worn with use. "You live here. It is practical, and I can keep the fire going through the night when it is coldest." He poured tea into 2 tin cups, offering one. "The school board provides a small salary and the space. It suffices." Asha accepted the cup, wrapping her hands around it. "Does the school board also provide enough fuel for winter?" "They provide a budget," Kieran said carefully. "What I do with it is my concern. You are buying less wood so you can buy more books." She nodded to the shelf, where several volumes still had the crisp look of recent purchase. "And slates, and chalk. The children need materials more than I need comfort. The children need a teacher who is not frozen solid come January." She sipped the tea, strong and bitter. "I can help. I cannot afford. I am not asking for money." Asha set the cup down. "Let me cut wood for the school. I need work to justify staying in the area, and you need fuel." Simple trade. Kieran studied her, trying to parse the offer for hidden angles and finding none. "Why do you want to stay in Millbrook? We are barely a village. 3 dozen families, no prospects, no industry beyond subsistence farming." "Maybe I like the scenery." "The scenery," he repeated flat. "The trees are very nice." Her expression remained innocent. "Tall, well-proportioned, good bark." Despite himself, Kieran laughed. "I see. Well, if the trees are that compelling, I would be a fool to refuse your help, though I insist on paying something." "Room and board," Asha said immediately. "There is a shed behind the school. I can sleep there and take meals with you. Fair trade for firewood and kindling." It was more than fair, generously so, but Kieran found himself nodding. "The shed will need cleaning. It is full of old supplies." "I will manage." She finished her tea. "Your students will be here soon. You should stoke that fire properly." She left before he could respond, slipping out as silently as she had come. Kieran added wood to the hearth, more than he would have normally used, and watched the flames catch and grow. Through the window, he could see Asha examining the shed, testing the door frame, peering through gaps in the boards. Even in the cold morning light, even doing something as mundane as evaluating shelter, she moved with a grace that made him want to keep watching. He forced his attention back to the slates, to the mathematics problems that suddenly seemed very dull indeed. The children arrived in clusters, the younger ones shepherded by older siblings, all of them bundled against the cold. They brought the usual chaos of morning, the shuffle and chatter, the arguments over who sat where and who had borrowed whose primer. Kieran settled them with practiced ease, taking attendance and distributing materials. "Master Harding," young Thomas Fletcher called out, pointing out the window. "There is an orc in the yard." The room went silent. Kieran looked up to see Asha hauling lumber from the shed, stacking boards with efficient precision. Several children had stood for a better view, and he could see fear on some faces, curiosity on others. "Her name is Asha Vex," Kieran said calmly. "She is a woodcutter, and she has agreed to provide firewood for the school. You will treat her with the same courtesy you show any adult. Understood?" "But she is an orc," Thomas persisted. "She is a person," Kieran corrected. and she is working to keep you warm this winter. Now, mathematics, turn to your slates." They obeyed, though several kept glancing toward the window. Kieran taught through the distraction, keeping the lessons moving, but he was aware of every time Asha crossed the yard, of the way she ignored the watching eyes and simply worked. At midday, he dismissed the children for their lunch break. Most brought bread and cheese from home, eating in small groups in the schoolyard. Kieran packed a basket with twice his usual portion and carried it outside. Asha had cleared half the shed, creating a neat pile of discarded rubbish and a smaller stack of salvageable materials. She sat on a stump, drinking from a water skin, her face flushed with exertion. "I thought you might be hungry," Kieran said, offering the basket. "Starving?" She took it without false modesty, pulling out bread and hard cheese, an apple from his precious store. "Your students are afraid of me." "Some of them. They will adjust." He settled on the ground nearby, his back against the schoolhouse wall. "Most of them have never seen an orc before, and their parents have told them stories." Asha bit into the apple, crisp and sharp. "Monsters in the dark, savages who steal children. The usual." "I will not pretend there is no prejudice," Kieran said quietly. "But I will not tolerate it in my school. They will learn better or they will learn elsewhere." Brave words. "You may lose students." "Then I lose them." He met her eyes. "But I will not compromise on this." Asha considered him, thoughtful. "You are not from here originally?" "No. I grew up in the south in a city called Brennan. I saw orcs there, working on the docks in the markets. I learned early that most of what people fear is ignorance dressed up as wisdom." "What brought you north to nowhere?" "I wanted to teach, and cities have more teachers than positions. The frontier needs schoolmasters." He smiled faintly. "And I like the quiet." "Is it quiet enough for you?" "It was until yesterday." Her laugh was sudden and bright, startling a pair of sparrows from the eaves. "Fair. I have disrupted your peace." "I did not say I minded." The words hung between them, more honest than Kieran had intended. Asha looked down at the apple, turning it in her hands, and something in her expression gentled. "The shed will be ready by tonight," she said. "I work quickly." "I have noticed." The children began filtering back from their break, casting glances at the orc woman sitting with their teacher like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kieran stood, brushing dirt from his trousers. "There is stew for supper," he said. "Nothing fancy but filling." "You are welcome to share." "I will bring fresh meat," Asha said. "I saw rabbit sign in the woods, a fair contribution." She was as good as her word. When Kieran dismissed the last student and began tidying the schoolroom, he heard the sharp crack of a snare trap springing. By the time he had the slates washed and stacked, Asha appeared with 2 fat rabbits already skinned and gutted. They cooked together in the small space, Asha preparing the meat with quick, expert cuts while Kieran chopped vegetables and stirred the pot. The domesticity of it felt strange and right at once, their movements falling into an easy rhythm as if they had shared a kitchen for years rather than hours. "You are good with the children," Asha said, tossing rabbit into the pot. "Patient. Teaching requires patience." "And genuine affection for the work," Kieran added carrots and parsnips, "though some days test both more than others. The boy who pointed me out, Thomas, he is not a bad child, only young and repeating what he has heard." Kieran stirred the pot. "Give him time. You have faith in people." "I have faith in education. Ignorance can be cured with knowledge and exposure. And if it cannot, then I have a very sturdy door and a good lock." He said it lightly, but they both knew he was serious. They ate as the sun set, painting the windows gold and amber. Asha told him about the woods, about the different trees and their properties, which burned hot and which burned long, how to read the forest for weather and season. Kieran listened, fascinated by the depth of her knowledge, The way she spoke of timber, the way he spoke of books. "You could teach this," he said, scraping the last of the stew from his bowl. "The children should know these things. Half of them will be farmers and woodsmen themselves. I am a wanderer, not a teacher. Teaching is just sharing what you know. You have been doing it all evening." Asha shook her head, but she looked thoughtful. "I should finish the shed before full dark. I can help." Together they hauled out the last of the rubbish and swept the wooden floor clean. Asha spread her bedroll in the corner, hanging a lantern from a hook in the ceiling. The space was small but weathertight, the boards solid against the wind. "It is good," she said, running her hand along a beam. "Better than many places I have stayed. You are welcome to it as long as you like." She looked at him in the lantern light, her face shadowed and lovely. "I may stay longer than you expect. I hope you do." The words were quiet, but they landed solid as a vow. Asha's breath caught just slightly, and for a moment Kieran thought she might step closer, but she only nodded once and bid him good night. He returned to the schoolhouse, to his narrow cot and his books, but sleep was long in coming. Through the window he could see the faint glow of her lantern, a warm point in the darkness, and he found himself smiling at nothing at all. The days fell into a pattern. Asha cut wood in the mornings, providing not just enough for the school but enough to sell to other families, building a small income. She took her midday meal with Kieran, listening to the lessons, occasionally correcting some point about trees or animals, or weather with the casual authority of lived experience. The children grew accustomed to her presence, fear fading to curiosity. The braver ones began asking questions when she was near, wanting to know about the forest, about tracks and scat, and how to tell edible plants from poison. Asha answered them simply, without condescension, and Kieran watched his students lean in, hungry for this knowledge their parents could not provide. A week after her arrival, Kieran found a letter in his morning post. The village council seal marked it official business, and his stomach tightened as he broke the wax. "Master Harding," the letter began in Councilman Gregory Shaw's pinched handwriting. "The winter budget allocation will be reviewed at the next council meeting, 3 weeks hence. Please prepare to justify the school's continued funding in light of declining attendance and questionable returns on investment. The council must consider whether these resources might be better allocated to road maintenance and grain storage." Kieran read it twice, then set it down very carefully. Declining attendance was a lie. He had the same 20 students as last year. Questionable returns was code for the council's belief that frontier children needed only enough education to count livestock and read contracts. They wanted to close the school and spend the money elsewhere. Bad news. He looked up to find Asha in the doorway, an armload of fresh split kindling balanced on one hip. "The council wants to shut down the school." He heard the flatness in his own voice. "They claim it is not worth the expense." Asha set the kindling down and crossed to the desk, reading the letter upside down with the ease of someone accustomed to gleaning information however she could. 3 weeks. They are giving you time to fight. Fight with what? They control the budget. If they decide to close the doors, I have no recourse. You have students. You have parents who depend on you to teach their children. Most of the parents are indifferent, Kieran said. They send their children because it is free and it keeps them occupied. If the school closes, they will shrug and put them back to work in the fields. Then you change their minds. Asha pulled a stool close, sitting across from him. You show them the school is valuable, essential. How? By teaching sums and letters they think their children do not need. By teaching things they do need. She tapped the letter. What does this council value? What would make them see the school as necessary? Kieran thought, running through every meeting he had attended, every conversation with Shaw and the other councilmen. practical skills. They value things with immediate, tangible returns: carpentry, animal husbandry, land management. Then teach that. Asha spread her hands. Expand the school, make it not just letters and numbers but real preparation for frontier life. I do not know those skills. I can barely keep my own firewood stocked. No, Asha agreed. But I do. The idea crystallized between them, sudden and obvious. Kieran sat back, his mind racing. You would teach? Why not? I know timber, tracking, trap setting, foraging, tool maintenance. Things every child here needs to know. She leaned forward, intent. We could split the day. Mornings for academics, afternoons for practical skills. Show the council a school that prepares children for real life, not just abstract learning. It could work. Kieran felt hope kindle, fragile but real. But you would have to stay, commit to at least the winter, probably longer. I know. You said you were a wanderer. I was. Asha held his gaze. Maybe it is time to stop wandering. Kieran wanted to ask why, wanted to know if the reason had anything to do with him, with the careful way they circled each other, the attraction neither of them had named. But this was not the time for that conversation. We start tomorrow, he said instead. I will revise the schedule. You plan your curriculum. Curriculum. She tested the word, half smiling. Very official. You are a teacher now. You might as well sound like one. They worked through the evening, Kieran sketching out a new daily structure while Asha listed skills and the order in which to teach them. She knew more than he had guessed, her knowledge ranging from basic forestry to weather prediction to the fundamentals of building a shelter. By the time they finished, they had outlined a program that would genuinely prepare children for life on the frontier. The council meets in 3 weeks, Kieran said, reviewing their notes. We need to show real progress by then, proof that this works. Then we make it work. Asha stood, stretching. I should sleep. Dawn comes early for teachers. Asha. He caught her hand without thinking, then froze, acutely aware of the warmth of her skin, the strength in her fingers. Thank you. You are saving more than the school. We are saving it together. She squeezed his hand once, gently, then let go. Good night, Kieran. He watched her cross the yard to the shed, then turned back to the lesson plans with a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the school and everything to do with the woman who had chosen to stay. The new structure began at dawn. Kieran taught the morning lessons as always, but with renewed purpose, knowing the afternoon would bring something entirely new. The children sensed the change, whispering among themselves, curious and uncertain. At midday, he called them to order. We are making some changes to the school. From now on, your afternoons will be spent learning practical skills for frontier life. Mistress Vex will be your instructor. Asha stepped forward from where she had been waiting by the door. She had dressed carefully, Kieran noticed, her clothes clean and mended, her hair neatly braided. Presenting herself as someone worthy of respect. Good afternoon, she said simply. Today we start with trees. Who can tell me why you need to know about different kinds of wood? Silence. The children stared, some nervous, some defiant. Because different woods burn different, Thomas Fletcher said finally, surprising everyone. Pa says pine burns too fast for the cook fire. Your father is right. Asha nodded to him, approving. Pine burns hot and quick. Good for starting a fire, bad for keeping one. Oak burns slow and steady. Birch catches easy even when wet. If you do not know your timber, you will freeze or waste fuel. Both can kill you come deep winter. She had their attention now. Even the youngest children were listening, caught by the simple truth that this knowledge mattered. We are going into the woods, Asha said. Everyone bring a coat. We will be outside for the rest of the day. They filed out in a ragged line, excitement overcoming nervousness. Kieran came last, pulling on his own jacket, and found Asha waiting for him. "You are a natural," he said quietly. "I am terrified." "You hide it well," she laughed soft and low. "Come on, schoolmaster, you should learn this too." They walked into the forest, 20 children and 2 adults, the autumn sun slanting through bare branches. Asha led them to a small clearing where several different trees grew in close proximity. She touched each in turn, naming it, describing its properties, showing them how to identify bark and branch structure and the scatter of fallen leaves. The children peppered her with questions. How did you remember all the types? Could you eat tree bark? What happened if you cut down the wrong kind? Asha answered each one patiently, sometimes turning questions back on the students to make them think. Kieran stood back and watched her teach, saw the way she adjusted her explanations for different ages, how she praised good guesses and corrected wrong ones without shame. She had said she was not a teacher, but everything in her bearing proved otherwise. By the time they returned to the schoolhouse, the children were chattering about oak and ash and hickory, arguing cheerfully over which was which. Parents waiting to collect their children looked surprised by the enthusiasm, and more than one asked what had changed. "We have expanded the curriculum," Kieran explained to Mistress Fletcher, Thomas's mother. "Afternoons will now include practical skills taught by Mistress Vex, woodcraft, foraging, basic survival skills. An orc teaching our children." The woman's face had gone stiff. "A master woodcutter teaching essential knowledge," Kieran corrected gently. "Knowledge that could save your son's life if he is ever lost in the forest." Mistress Fletcher looked at Thomas, who was breathlessly describing different types of bark to his younger sister. Some of the hardness left her expression. "I suppose it cannot hurt," she said reluctantly. "As long as it is useful learning, it will be. You have my word." She left with her children, and Kieran turned to find Asha watching from the schoolhouse door. "That could have gone worse," she said. "It could have gone better. Give them time. Like you said about young Thomas, they are only repeating what they have heard." She came down the steps. "The children enjoyed it. That counts for something. They loved it. You were brilliant. I was adequate." But she smiled, pleased despite herself. "Tomorrow I will teach them about animal tracks, maybe bring some pelts to show the difference between species. I look forward to it." They walked together to the fire pit outside the shed, where Asha had set rabbit stew cooking in a pot on a tripod. The smell of it made Kieran's stomach growl, and he realized he had barely eaten all day, too focused on the lessons and the success of their new plan. "Sit," Asha ordered, ladling stew into bowls. "You are running on fumes." "So are you. I am used to it. You are not." She handed him a bowl and settled beside him on the bench she had built from scrap lumber. "Eat." They ate in comfortable silence as the sun set and the air grew cold. Kieran found himself studying her profile in the firelight, the clean lines of her face, the way the glow caught in her dark eyes. She must have felt his gaze because she turned, one eyebrow raised. "What?" "Just thinking." "About how lucky I am that you have terrible judgment about axe grips." Asha laughed, the sound bright and surprised. "Terrible judgment. I improved your form significantly." "You did not change a single thing that mattered." "No," she agreed, her smile turning softer. "I suppose I did not." The moment stretched between them, weighted with everything they were not saying. Kieran thought about closing the distance, about finding out if her lips were as soft as they looked. But the school still hung in the balance, their partnership too new and too important to complicate. He looked away first, back to his stew, and felt Asha do the same. The moment passed, gentle and unresolved. "We have 3 weeks," Kieran said, "to prove this works. Then we had better make them count." They did. The days took on a new rhythm. Mornings of reading and arithmetic giving way to afternoons in the forest or the schoolyard. learning to identify edible plants and set snares, and raid the sky for weather. Asha taught with the same quiet intensity she brought to everything, and the children blossomed under her attention. Parents began to notice. Mistress Fletcher arrived one afternoon to find Thomas teaching his sister how to identify rabbit tracks, and the pride on her face was unmistakable. Farmer Davies reported that his daughter had correctly predicted a storm 2 days before it hit, reading the clouds the way Asha had taught her. Word spread, and the skepticism began to shift slowly into something that might become approval. Kieran documented everything, keeping careful records of attendance and progress, noting skills learned and improvements made. He wrote a detailed report for the council, emphasizing the practical value of the expanded program and its importance to frontier families. 2 weeks into their experiment, Councilman Shaw himself appeared at the school. He was a tall man with iron-gray hair and the pinched expression of someone who found most things lacking. He stood in the back of the schoolroom during morning lessons, arms folded, saying nothing. At midday, when Asha led the children outside for tracking practice, Shaw followed. He watched her demonstrate how to read the depth and spacing of deer prints to judge the animal's size and speed, how to tell fresh sign from old. The children crowded around, asking questions, trying to spot tracks themselves in the soft earth. Kieran stood beside Shaw, tense with the weight of being evaluated. The councilman said nothing, his face giving away nothing. Finally, as the children spread out to search for more tracks, Shaw spoke. "The orc woman, she knows her business. Mistress Vex is an expert woodcutter and tracker. The children are learning skills they will use their entire lives, practical skills, essential ones." Shaw grunted, still watching Asha crouch beside young Sarah Miller, pointing out the faint impression of a fox's paw. The council is concerned about return on investment. Education for its own sake is a luxury we cannot afford. "This is not education for its own sake," Kieran said carefully. "This is preparation for survival. Every child here will need to understand the forest, to read weather and animal behavior, to know which plants feed and which poison. We are giving them tools they cannot get anywhere else. Their parents could teach them, could they? Most parents here are farmers from the south, transplanted to the frontier with no knowledge of this terrain. They are learning alongside their children." Kieran gestured to where Mistress Fletcher stood at the tree line, listening intently as Asha explained something about deer behavior. "We are educating the entire community." Shaw was silent for a long moment. Then, "The council meets in 1 week. Be prepared to present your case. I will be ready." The councilman left without another word, and Kieran released a breath he had not known he was holding. Asha appeared at his elbow, her expression questioning. "He was not hostile," Kieran said. "That is something. But not convinced. Not yet." He turned to her. "We need to show them something undeniable, something that proves the school's value beyond any doubt. What did you have in mind?" Kieran thought, running through possibilities and discarding them. Then, "A demonstration at the council meeting. We bring the children, let them show what they have learned. Public speaking in front of the village council." Asha grimaced. "They are children, Kieran. That is terrifying." "They are brave, and they believe in what we are teaching them." He caught her hand, squeezed it. "We prepare them, make it a presentation they can be proud of. Show the council what education looks like when it matters. You are asking a lot, I know, but I think they can do it. And I think you can lead them through it." Asha looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Something in her expression softened. "You have too much faith in me." "I have exactly the right amount." She did not pull away, and they stood there in the weak autumn sunlight, hands linked, while around them children searched for tracks and called out discoveries. It felt like a promise, fragile and vital. "All right," Asha said finally. "We do this, but we do it properly. No half measures." I would expect nothing less. They spent the week preparing. Kieran worked with the children on presentation skills, teaching them to speak clearly and confidently, to make eye contact and project their voices. Asha drilled them on their knowledge, asking rapid-fire questions until the answers came automatically. They built displays of different wood types, mounted animal tracks in plaster, created charts showing edible and poisonous plants. The children threw themselves into the work with fierce determination. Even the youngest understood what was at stake. If the school closed, they would lose not just their education, but the community it provided, the sense that they were learning to master their world rather than merely surviving in it. The night before the council meeting, Kieran could not sleep. He paced the schoolhouse, checking and rechecking his notes, rehearsing arguments in his head. Finally, he gave up and went outside, needing air and space. Asha sat on the bench by the fire pit, feeding small sticks into a low flame. She looked up as he approached. Could not sleep either. Too restless, he settled beside her. What if it is not enough? What if they shut us down anyway? Then we fight harder, find another way. She poked at the fire. But I think we have a real chance. The children are ready. Your arguments are solid. We have done everything we can. I know. He stopped, searching for words. This school matters. These children matter. The thought of failing them, you will not fail them. Asha's voice was firm. I will not let you. He looked at her, this woman who had appeared in his life barely a month ago and changed everything. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have moved on by now, found work elsewhere. Why stay and fight for a school in the middle of nowhere? Asha was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled between them, sending up sparks into the dark. I have been wandering for 5 years, she said finally. Since I left my clan, I told myself I liked the freedom, the ability to go anywhere and owe nothing to anyone. But the truth is I was just afraid. Of what? Of staying. Of putting down roots and having them torn up. She turned to face him. My clan did not approve of my choices. I wanted to learn trades, to travel, to live differently than they thought an orc woman should. So I left. And I kept leaving every place I landed before anyone could tell me I did not belong. Kieran wanted to reach for her but kept his hand still, sensing she needed to finish. Then I came here, Asha continued. And there was this stubborn, kind schoolmaster who looked at me and saw a person, not a monster, who asked for my help like it was a natural thing, who fights for children who are not his own because he believes they deserve better. She smiled faintly. It made me want to stay, to fight for something instead of always running. I am glad you did, Kieran said softly. Stay, I mean. I am too. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, I do not regret it. He turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. Neither do I. They sat like that, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. And if Kieran did not sleep much when he finally returned to his cot, it was not from worry but from the warmth that had settled somewhere behind his ribs, steady as a heartbeat. The council met in the village hall, a drafty building that served for meetings and occasional gatherings. The 5 councilmen sat behind a long table, Shaw in the center, flanked by 2 farmers and 2 merchants. A handful of villagers filled the benches, parents and curious onlookers drawn by word of the school's fate. Kieran stood before them, 20 children arrayed behind him in neat rows, Asha at his side. He had dressed carefully, his good coat brushed clean, his collar crisp. The children wore their best as well, faces scrubbed and nervous. Shaw called the meeting to order with a rap of his knuckles on the table. We are here to discuss the continued funding of the village school. Master Harding, you may present your case. Kieran stepped forward, his notes clutched in hands he refused to let shake. He had rehearsed this until he could recite it in his sleep. Honorable councilmen, concerned citizens, I am here to demonstrate that our school is not merely an expense, but an investment in the future of this community. In the past month, we have expanded our curriculum to include practical skills essential to frontier life. With the help of Mistress Asha Vex, an expert woodcutter and survivalist, we now offer comprehensive education that prepares children for the realities they will face. He gestured to the children. Rather than simply tell you what they have learned, I would like them to show you. Thomas Fletcher, please come forward. Thomas stepped up, holding a tray of wood samples. He spoke clearly, identifying each type and explaining its properties, when to use it for building or burning, how to tell seasoned wood from green. He was nervous but thorough, and when he finished, several councilmen were nodding. Sarah Miller came next, demonstrating how to identify animal tracks and interpret what they meant about the animal's size, speed, and intention. Then Marcus Davies showed edible plants and explained which parts were safe and when to harvest them. One by one, the children presented, showing off knowledge that was immediately, tangibly useful. The councilmen watched in silence. Shaw's expression remained neutral, but the other men leaned forward, paying close attention. Finally, Asha stepped forward. If I may, councilmen. These children represent every family in this village. What they have learned in 1 month is only the beginning. Given time, we can produce young people who understand their environment, who can support their families and contribute to the community's survival and growth. That is worth any investment. Mistress Vex, Shaw said, you are an orc. Why should we trust you to educate our children? The room went silent. Kieran felt anger flash hot, but before he could speak, Asha raised a hand to stop him. Because I care about their future, she said evenly. Because I have spent my life mastering skills they need, and I am willing to share that knowledge. Because their safety and success matter more than your prejudice. The bluntness of it left Shaw speechless. Several villagers shifted uncomfortably. But one of the other councilmen, old Farmer Graves, cleared his throat. My granddaughter comes home every day full of what she learned, he said. She can predict weather now, tell good wood from bad. That is more useful than anything her mother or I could teach her. He looked at Shaw. Seems to me the school is doing exactly what we need. Agreed, said Merchant Oaks. My boy used to hate his lessons. Now he cannot wait to go. That alone is worth the expense. Shaw looked around the table, reading the shift in sentiment. He was outnumbered and knew it. The council will deliberate, he said stiffly. Master Harding, Mistress Vex, please wait outside with the children. They filed out into the cold afternoon. The children clustered around Asha, asking how they did, whether it was enough. She reassured them with a calmness Kieran envied, because his own heart was racing. We did all we could, he said quietly for her ears only. Now it is out of our hands. It was enough, she sounded certain. You saw their faces, we won. She was right. When Shaw emerged 20 minutes later, his expression was sour, but his words were what Kieran needed to hear. The council has voted to continue funding the school with the expanded curriculum for a trial period of 1 year. At that time, we will review the results and determine ongoing support. He looked at Asha. Mistress Vex, the position of practical skills instructor is yours if you want it. Salary to be determined. I accept, Asha said immediately. Shaw nodded curtly and retreated inside. The moment he was gone, the children erupted into cheers. Parents who had been waiting rushed forward, congratulating Kieran and thanking Asha. Their earlier reservations forgotten in the relief of victory. Kieran found himself shaking hands, accepting praise, trying to respond coherently while his mind spun with the enormity of what they had just accomplished. The school was safe. The children would continue learning. And Asha, he looked for her and found her surrounded by students, laughing as they pelted her with excited questions about what they would learn next. Her face was bright with joy, and Kieran felt something in his chest expand, too big for his ribs to contain. She caught his eye across the crowd and he smiled back, helpless and happy. That evening they celebrated, the whole village it seemed turning out for an impromptu gathering at the Grouse and Kettle. Mistress Carlyle provided cider and ale, and someone brought out a fiddle, and the common room filled with music and laughter. Kieran found a quiet corner, nursing a mug of cider and watching the festivities with deep contentment. Asha appeared beside him, her own drink in hand. "You did it," she said. "Saved your school." "We did it," he corrected. "I could not have managed without you. Partners, then." She raised her mug and he clinked his against it. Partners. They drank, and Kieran felt the weight of the past weeks lift from his shoulders. The school was secure. Asha was staying. The future spread out before them, full of possibility. "I have been thinking," Asha said slowly, "about the shed." "What about it?" "It is small, and cold, and farther from the schoolhouse than is strictly practical." Kieran's heart began to beat faster. "I suppose that is true. There is space in the schoolhouse, a second room that is just storage now. It could be cleared out, made into proper living quarters. It could," he agreed carefully, "for someone who wanted to live there. I am just saying." Asha looked down at her drink. "If one were to stay long-term, teaching and living in the same place, it would make sense to have better accommodations. It would make a great deal of sense." She glanced up at him, and there was vulnerability in her eyes, a question she was almost brave enough to ask. Kieran set his mug down and turned to face her fully. "Asha, I want you to have that room. I want you close in the schoolhouse, not in some drafty shed." He paused, searching for courage. "I want you close for reasons that have nothing to do with teaching or convenience." "What reasons?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because I think about you constantly. Because you make me laugh and challenge me and make everything better just by being present. Because he stopped, the words too big, too soon. "Because you what?" "Because I am falling in love with you," Kieran said, simple and true. "And I do not want you at a distance anymore." Asha set her own mug down with careful precision. Then she stepped into his space, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I already fell," she said. "Weeks ago. Probably the moment I used that ridiculous excuse about your axe grip. It really was ridiculous. Terrible." She was smiling now. "But it worked." "It did." He reached up, cupping her face with one hand, his thumb brushing the curve of her cheekbone. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed, and Kieran bent to kiss her, slow and sweet. She tasted like cider and hope. Her hands found his waist, pulling him closer, and Kieran wound his fingers through her braid, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. Around them the celebration continued, but he was aware of nothing except Asha, the warmth of her, the way she fit perfectly against him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Asha laughed softly. "We are giving the village something to talk about. Let them talk." Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I do not care, neither do I." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, until someone called for a toast, and they were pulled back into the celebration. But Kieran kept Asha's hand in his, their fingers laced together, a silent promise that neither was willing to let go. The next morning they began clearing the storage room. It was full of broken desks and outdated books, musty boxes of supplies no one had touched in years. They worked side by side, hauling rubbish out to the burn pile and salvaging what could be used. This was someone's living space once, Asha said, running her hand along the wall. You can see where a bed frame was mounted. The last schoolmaster before me. He was older, retired eventually, and moved south to live with his daughter. Kieran pried open a stubborn window, letting in fresh air. The room has been storage ever since. It has good light. Asha tested the floorboards, finding them solid, and it is warm, close to the main hearth. I can work with this. They spent 3 days transforming the space. Kieran built a simple bed frame from salvaged lumber while Asha scrubbed the walls and floor until they gleamed. They hung curtains for privacy, installed shelves for her few possessions, brought in a small table and chair. When they finished, the room was sparse but comfortable, a real home rather than a temporary shelter. What do you think? Kieran asked, watching Asha arrange her things on the shelves. I think it is perfect. She turned to him, smiling. Thank you for this, for everything. You do not need to thank me. This is your home now for as long as you want it. I want it for a long time. She crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist. Maybe forever. Forever sounds good to me. He kissed her again, taking his time, savoring the way she melted into him. They had time now, no longer racing against deadlines or fighting for survival. Just the slow unfolding of a future they could build together. Winter came in earnest, snow blanketing the village and turning the forest into a wonderland of white and silence. The school remained warm and full, children arriving each morning with rosy cheeks and chattering excitement. Kieran taught reading and writing and the basics of natural philosophy, while Asha took them into the snowy woods to learn tracking and winter survival. They were a good team, complementing each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. The children thrived under their combined attention, and parents who had been skeptical now spoke of the school as essential, something that set their village apart. On the longest night of winter, the village held a solstice celebration. The grouse and kettle was packed again, the air warm with bodies and bright with candles. Kieran stood with Asha near the hearth, watching neighbors dance and laugh. I have been thinking, he said quietly, about the future. The school is stable now, growing even. We will need to expand eventually, hire more teachers. That is a good problem to have. Asha leaned into his side and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I have also been thinking about us. She tilted her head to look at him. What about us? Kieran took a breath, steadying himself. I know it has only been a few months, I know we have time, but I also know how I feel and it is not going to change, so I might as well ask now. Asha straightened, suddenly alert. Ask what? Marry me. The words came out simple, stripped of artifice. Be my wife. Build this life with me properly, not just as colleagues or even lovers, but as partners in everything. For a long moment she just stared at him. Then her face broke into the widest smile he had ever seen. Yes, she said. Yes, you strange, wonderful man. I will marry you. He kissed her there in front of everyone, and a cheer went up from the gathered villagers. Someone called for a toast, and mugs were raised, and Mistress Carlyle declared the drinks were on the house for the happy couple. Kieran barely heard any of it. He was too busy holding Asha, feeling her laughter against his chest, thinking that he had never been this happy in his entire life. They married in early spring, when the snow had melted and the first green shoots pushed through the earth. The ceremony was simple, held in the schoolhouse with all the children attending and most of the village crowding in. The local magistrate presided, reading the vows while Kieran and Asha stood hand in hand, dressed in their best. I cannot promise perfection, Kieran said when it was time for his vows. But I promise to stand beside you, to support your dreams, to be your partner in everything we build. I promise to love you truly, for as long as I live. I promise the same, Asha said, her voice steady. And I promise to stay. No more wandering. My home is here with you." They exchanged simple bands, forged by the village blacksmith from silver Kieran had saved for months. Then the magistrate declared them married, and Kieran kissed his wife while the children cheered and threw early spring flowers. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music, dancing and toasts, endless congratulations from neighbors who had come to genuinely respect and care for the mismatched couple. Kieran danced with Asha until his feet ached, then sat with her on the schoolhouse steps and watched the stars come out. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close against the evening chill. "More than I knew I could be." She kissed his jaw, his cheek, the corner of his mouth. "Thank you for asking me to stay. Thank you for saying yes." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fading sounds of the party. Tomorrow they would return to the work of teaching, to the familiar rhythm of their days. But tonight was just for them, for the promise they had made and the future that stretched ahead. The years that followed were full and good. The school grew, requiring an addition to the building and eventually a second teacher to handle the younger children. Asha's practical skills program became famous beyond the village, drawing students from surrounding settlements who wanted to learn from the best. Kieran published a series of primers combining academic and practical learning, distributed to frontier schools across the region. His name became known in educational circles, but he never left Millbrook. His life was there, his work, his wife. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Asha announced she was pregnant. Kieran was terrified and ecstatic in equal measure, hovering over her until she threatened to lock him out of the house if he did not stop fretting. Their son was born on a summer morning, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Brennan, after the city where Kieran had grown up, and he had his mother's dark eyes and his father's gentle temperament. Watching Asha with their son, seeing her fierce protectiveness and tender care, Kieran fell in love all over again. "He is going to be spoiled rotten," she said one evening, nursing Brennan while Kieran corrected papers. "Between us and 20 surrogate siblings at the school. He will be loved," Kieran said. "There are worse fates." "True." She smiled down at the baby. "I want him to know both sides of his heritage, human and orc. I want him to be proud of all of it. He will be. We will make sure of it." Brennan grew quickly, a bright and curious child who toddled after students and tried to join lessons before he could properly walk. The children of the school adored him, and he had a dozen willing babysitters whenever Asha needed to teach. When Brennan was 2, Asha became pregnant again. This time it was a daughter, born in deep winter, with her father's light brown hair and her mother's strong build. They named her Greta, and she proved even more adventurous than her brother, fearless in a way that made Kieran's heart stop regularly. "She gets that from you," he told Asha after Greta climbed to the top of the schoolhouse bookshelf at age 3. "She gets that from both of us," Asha corrected, plucking their daughter down. "We are both stubborn fools who do not know when to quit." Fair point. The school continued to thrive. The council not only renewed funding every year but increased it, recognizing the value of what Kieran and Asha had built. Children who graduated from their program went on to become successful farmers, crafters, and leaders in their communities, always crediting the education they had received. Prejudice against orcs did not disappear entirely, but in Millbrook it faded to near nothing. Asha was Mistress Vex, teacher and neighbor, valued and respected. When other orcs passed through, they found a warmer welcome than in most human settlements, word having spread that this village was different. On their 10th anniversary, Kieran and Asha stood together in the schoolyard, watching Brennan help younger students with their reading while Greta led a tracking lesson in the woods with a confidence that belied her 7 years. "Look at what we made," Asha said softly. Not just the children, but all of this. The school, the community, the life. I could not have done it without you. Kieran laced his fingers through hers. You saved me that day, you know, when you corrected my axe grip. Your terrible, awful axe grip, which was completely fine. Appalling, she grinned at him. But it got your attention. It did, and I have been yours ever since. She turned to face him fully, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. I used to think staying in one place meant giving up freedom, but this is the freest I have ever been. Building something that matters with someone I love, I would not trade it for anything. Neither would I. He kissed her, sweet and familiar. Here is to the next 10 years. And the 10 after that, she agreed, and all the ones that follow. They stood together in the afternoon sun, surrounded by the life they had built, the children they were raising, the community they had shaped. And Kieran thought about that autumn day so many years ago when a strange, beautiful orc woman had pressed against his back and changed everything. He had been doing it wrong, apparently. But somehow, miraculously, they had ended up doing it right. Summer turned the schoolyard into a riot of green, and the children spent more time outdoors than in, learning to fish in the nearby creek and identify birds by their calls. Kieran taught mathematics under the shade of the old oak, while Asha led groups into the forest for increasingly complex tracking exercises. Brennan, now 8, had become a serious child with a love of books and a quiet determination that reminded Kieran of himself. Greta, at 5, was his opposite in almost every way, loud and physical and fearless. They balanced each other well, and Kieran often found them teaching younger children with the patient care they had learned from watching their parents. One afternoon in late summer, a rider came to the school bearing a letter with an official seal. Kieran opened it to find an invitation from the Regional Education Board, requesting that he and Asha present their integrated curriculum at a conference in the capital that autumn. They want us to speak to other educators, he said, reading the letter aloud to Asha that evening, to share what we have built here. The capital is 3 weeks' travel, Asha said, stirring the pot over the fire, and we cannot leave the school for that long. We could close for a few weeks. The older students could handle independent study, or we could send our regrets. She tasted the stew, added salt. Millbrook is our home, our work is here. Kieran set the letter down, studying her face. You do not want to go. I do not need to. Asha came to sit beside him. We built something good here, something that works. Let others come study us if they are curious. I have no desire to travel anymore. You used to love traveling. I used to need it because I did not have a home. She took his hand. Now I do. And I do not want to leave it, not even for a few weeks. He understood completely. Then we stay. I will write and decline the invitation. You should go. Asha squeezed his fingers. You are the academic. You can explain the theory and the pedagogy. I will hold things here. I am not leaving you and the children for weeks. Then we compromise. She smiled. Write back and tell them we can host visitors here instead. They can send observers to see the program in action. That way everyone benefits. It was, as usual, a perfect solution. Kieran wrote the letter that night, offering to host educational observers rather than travel to the conference. The board accepted enthusiastically, and arrangements were made for a delegation to visit Millbrook the following spring. The visit, when it came, went better than Kieran had dared hope. The observers were impressed by the integration of academic and practical skills, by the children's obvious enthusiasm, by the way the community had embraced the school as essential. They spent a week documenting the curriculum and interviewing students and parents. Before they left, the lead observer, a distinguished educator named Professor Winters, took Kieran aside. What you have built here is remarkable, truly. I have visited dozens of schools and none are as effective or as beloved by their communities. We have been fortunate, Kieran said. The village supported us when it mattered most. It is more than fortune. It is vision and dedication and a willingness to try something new. Winters glanced to where Asha was demonstrating fire-starting techniques to a group of fascinated observers. Your wife is extraordinary. I have never seen anyone teach with such natural authority. She is the best teacher I know, Kieran agreed, and the best partner I could ask for. You are lucky to have found each other. I am aware. That evening, after the observers had retired to the inn, Kieran found Asha in the schoolyard, sitting on the bench they had built together years ago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. They are very impressed, she said as he settled beside her. So they should be. You were brilliant today. We were brilliant. She leaned into him. This is ours, what we built together. It is. He kissed the top of her head, and I would not change a single thing. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Inside the schoolhouse, Brennan was helping Greta with her letters, their voices carrying through the open window. It was a moment of perfect peace, ordinary and precious. You ever wonder, Asha said quietly, what would have happened if I had not stopped that day? If I had just kept walking past your woodpile all the time. Kieran tightened his arm around her. And I thank every star that you did not. Your axe grip was truly terrible. It was perfect and you know it. She laughed, bright and free. Maybe, but you looked lonely. And I wanted a reason to talk to you. I was lonely. I just did not know it until you arrived. And now I am the opposite of lonely. I am surrounded by noise and chaos and love, and I could not be happier. She turned to kiss him, slow and sweet, and Kieran thought about all the years they had shared, all the moments that had led them here. The struggle to save the school, the slow building of trust and love, the children they had raised and the community they had shaped. It had started with a lie about an axe grip and become the truest thing in his life. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The school expanded again, requiring a third teacher to handle the increasing number of students. Young people who had graduated from the program began returning as assistants, giving back to the place that had shaped them. Brennan proved to have a gift for teaching, spending his free time helping younger children with their reading and mathematics. Greta excelled at the practical skills, often shadowing her mother into the forest and returning with detailed observations about animal behavior and plant life. When Brennan turned 16, tall and serious and kind, he announced his intention to become a teacher. Kieran felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly brought him to tears. "You are sure?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Completely." Brennan smiled, shy but certain. "I want to do what you and Mother do, make a difference. Then we will make sure you get the best training possible." Brennan apprenticed under them both, learning academic pedagogy from Kieran and practical instruction from Asha. He had a natural rapport with students, patient and encouraging, and Kieran could see the beginning of an excellent teacher. Greta, at 13, was still undecided about her future but leaning toward becoming a ranger, combining her mother's forest skills with a desire to protect the wilderness. She spent weeks at a time in the woods with Asha, learning tracking and survival at an advanced level. "She is going to leave eventually," Asha said one evening, watching Greta prepare for another extended camping trip. "Head out to make her own way." "I know." Kieran felt the bittersweet ache of it, "but she will come back. This is her home. She will." Asha smiled. "She is my daughter. She will wander, but she will always come home." That summer brought news that the Regional Education Board wanted to use Millbrook's model as a template for other frontier schools. Kieran spent weeks working with officials to document their curriculum and training methods, creating guides that could be adapted for different communities. It was strange to think of their small school becoming a blueprint for others, but also deeply satisfying. They had proved that education could be both rigorous and practical, that academic and manual skills were not opposing forces, but complementary ones. On a warm evening in late summer, the village threw a celebration in honor of the school's 20th anniversary. The entire community turned out, including former students who had traveled from distant settlements to attend. The schoolyard was filled with tables laden with food, children running and playing, adults swapping stories and laughter. Kieran stood with Asha, watching the festivities with deep contentment. Brennan was deep in conversation with several former students who had become teachers themselves. Greta was demonstrating tracking techniques to a group of fascinated younger children. 20 years, Asha said softly. It has gone so fast and been so full. Kieran pulled her close. I could not have imagined this back when I first arrived, a lonely schoolmaster in a failing school. And I could not have imagined stopping, finding a home, finding you. I am glad we were both wrong. She laughed, the sound he loved best in the world. Me too. As the evening deepened and the stars came out, someone called for a toast. The gathering quieted and old Farmer Graves stood, raising his mug. To Kieran and Asha Harding, he called out, who saved our school, educated our children, and showed us all what real dedication looks like. We are better for having you here. The crowd echoed the toast, voices rising in agreement. Kieran felt his throat tighten with emotion, and Asha squeezed his hand. Thank you, he managed. All of you. This school, this community, it is all of ours. We built it together. More toasts followed, more stories and laughter, and the celebration continued late into the night. When finally the crowd began to disperse, heading home through the warm darkness, Kieran and Asha remained in the schoolyard with their children. It has been a good life, Kieran said, looking at his family, his school, his home. It has, Asha agreed. And it is not over yet. We have more years to build, more students to teach, more life to live. Then let us make them count. They walked inside together, Brennan and Greta chattering about the evening, and Kieran felt a deep sense of gratitude for every choice that had led him here. For the school that had brought him north, for the woman who had stopped to correct his axe grip, for the life they had built from that improbable beginning. He had been doing it wrong, she had said. But looking at everything they had created together, Kieran knew they had gotten it exactly right. The autumn of their 25th year together brought early frost and the promise of a hard winter. The school was busier than ever, now serving nearly 50 students with a staff of 4 teachers including Brennan, who had grown into his role with grace and skill. Greta had left 2 years prior to train as a ranger in the Northern Territories, but she wrote regularly and visited when she could. Her latest letter spoke of meeting someone, a human woman who shared her passion for wilderness preservation, and Kieran could read between the lines to see his daughter's growing affection. She is happy, Asha said, reading the letter over his shoulder. I can hear it in her words. She is. And she will bring this woman home eventually so we can meet her properly. I look forward to it. Asha set the letter aside. Our children are making their own lives. It is good. It is. Kieran pulled her into his lap, grateful that at 50 he still had the strength to do so. And we get to enjoy our own lives again. No children underfoot, no diapers or scraped knees. Just students and lesson plans and council meetings. Exactly. Peace and quiet. They both laughed, knowing that peace and quiet were foreign concepts in their world. But Kieran would not have wanted it any other way. That winter proved as harsh as predicted, with deep snows and bitter cold. The The school became a refuge. Its hearth kept blazing, the children arriving each morning grateful for warmth and normalcy. Asha taught winter survival skills, and several of her lessons proved immediately useful when a late-season storm stranded several families in the forest. The children she had trained were able to build proper shelters and start fires, keeping everyone safe until the weather cleared and rescue parties could reach them. The village praised the school's practical curriculum, and several neighboring settlements sent requests for Asha to train their teachers in similar methods. She agreed, spending 1 week each month traveling to nearby communities and conducting intensive workshops. Kieran worried about her traveling in winter, but Asha only laughed at his concern. "I have survived worse," she reminded him, "and I am teaching them how to survive too. It is important work. I know, I just miss you when you are gone." "I miss you too." She kissed him soundly. "But I will always come home." And she did, returning from each trip with stories of other schools and students, enthusiastic about spreading the knowledge they had accumulated. Kieran supported her fully, proud of her growing reputation as an educator and expert. In the spring, Greta returned home with her partner, a quiet woman named Alina who worked as a wildlife surveyor. The introduction was slightly awkward, both Greta and Alina nervous, but Kieran and Asha welcomed Alina warmly, and the tension dissolved over dinner and conversation. "She makes me happy," Greta confided to Kieran later. "Happier than I thought I could be." "Then that is all that matters," Kieran said. "You have my blessing and your mother's, and we look forward to knowing her better." Greta hugged him fiercely, this fierce daughter of his who had inherited Asha's strength and his own stubborn heart. "Thank you for always understanding." "Always," he promised. Alina proved to be an excellent addition to their extended family. She and Greta visited regularly, often staying for weeks while Alina conducted surveys of the local wildlife. She and Asha became close, sharing a love of the wilderness and a practical approach to life. The years continued their steady march. Brennan married a young woman from a neighboring village, a teacher herself, and they took positions at a frontier school 2 days' travel away. He visited often, bringing his wife and eventually their children, Kieran and Asha's first grandchildren. Holding his grandson for the first time, a squalling infant with his mother's red hair and Brennan's serious expression, Kieran felt time fold in on itself. He remembered holding Brennan like this, remembered the terror and joy of new fatherhood, and now here was another generation, another chance at love and family. "You are going to spoil him rotten," Asha said, watching Kieran coo at the baby. "Absolutely," Kieran agreed. "It is a grandparent's prerogative." The boy was named Byron, and 2 years later came a granddaughter named Grace. Brennan and his wife brought them to visit regularly, and the schoolyard once again filled with the sound of small children. Kieran watched his grandchildren play where their father had played, learned in the same schoolroom, explored the same forest paths. There was a beautiful continuity to it, a sense of life repeating and renewing itself. "We are getting old," Asha said one evening, watching Byron attempt to climb the same oak tree Greta had conquered as a child. "Speak for yourself. I am in my prime." Kieran flexed his arm, making her laugh. "Your prime was 20 years ago. Details." He pulled her close. "We are aging gracefully together. That is what matters. Gracefully." She kissed his jaw. "You have more gray than brown now, and you are as beautiful as the day I met you. Liar." But she smiled, pleased. They had both changed, of course. Kieran's hair had gone silver, his face lined with years of laughter and concentration. Asha's hair was streaked with gray, her hands marked with the scars of a lifetime working with wood and tools. But to each other, They remained as vital and attractive as ever, bound by decades of love and partnership. On their 30th anniversary, the village threw another celebration, this one honoring not just the school but Kieran and Asha themselves. Students past and present gathered to share stories, to thank them for the education and care they had provided. "You changed my life," said Sarah Miller, now a successful farmer and mother of 3. "I would not be who I am without what you taught me." "You gave me a future," added Marcus Davies, who had become a carpenter of some renown. "I was just a restless kid before your school gave me direction." Story after story, gratitude piled upon gratitude, until Kieran felt overwhelmed by the impact they had made. These were not just students but lives shaped, futures built, a community transformed. When it was their turn to speak, Asha stood first. "Teaching has been the greatest privilege of my life. Watching you grow, seeing you become the people you are now, it is more rewarding than I can express. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives." Kieran followed, his voice rough with emotion. "Asha and I came together by chance, but what we built here was deliberate. Every lesson, every innovation, every moment of care was intentional, and you made it worthwhile. You are our legacy, and we could not be prouder." The crowd erupted in applause, and Kieran found himself surrounded by former students, by friends, by the community that had become his family. Asha appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his, and he held tight. "Not bad for a failed attempt to correct an axe grip," she murmured. "Best failure of my life," he agreed. That night, alone in their quarters with the sounds of celebration fading outside, they lay together in the bed they had shared for 3 decades. "You have any regrets?" Asha asked, her head on his shoulder. Kieran thought about it seriously, running through the years, the choices, the paths taken and not taken. "None, you, not a single one." She kissed his chest, right above his heart. "This life with you, it is everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you," he said, simple and true. "I have loved you since you pressed against my back and pretended my axe grip needed fixing. I love you too." Her voice was soft in the darkness. "My strange, wonderful schoolmaster." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and Kieran dreamed of the future still to come. The years that followed were quieter but no less full. Kieran and Asha gradually reduced their teaching loads, training younger educators to take over more responsibility. They remained involved in the school's direction and management, but spent more time on other pursuits. Asha wrote a comprehensive guide to frontier survival and woodcraft, illustrated with detailed drawings and filled with decades of accumulated wisdom. It was published and distributed to schools across the region, becoming a standard text for practical education. Kieran compiled and edited a series of integrated lesson plans, showing other educators how to combine academic and practical learning effectively. His work influenced curriculum development in dozens of schools, spreading the model they had pioneered in Millbrook. They traveled occasionally, visiting Brennan and his family, spending time with Greta and Alina in the Northern Territories. But they always returned to Millbrook, to the school and the home they had built. On a crisp autumn morning in their 38th year together, Kieran woke to find Asha already up, standing at the window and looking out at the schoolyard. "Come back to bed," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "It is early yet. I was just thinking." She turned to him, backlit by the sunrise, "about how different my life could have been, different how, if I had kept wandering, never stopped in Millbrook, never met you." She came back to the bed, settling beside him. "I would have missed all of this. The school, the children, our family, you. I would have missed it too." He pulled her down, wrapping around her. "I would have been a lonely old schoolmaster, competent but isolated." "We saved each other," Asha said. "In every way that matters, we did." They stayed like that, holding each other in the morning light, and Kieran felt a profound gratitude for every choice that had led them here. For the school that had brought him north, for the courage that had made Asha stop and speak, for the love they had built day by day, year by year. Later that morning, walking to the schoolhouse together as they had done thousands of times before, Asha paused by the woodpile where they had first met. "Your axe grip really was fine, you know," she said. "I know." Kieran grinned. "I have always known. And yet you let me lecture you about it. Because you were beautiful and bold and I wanted any excuse to keep you talking." He took her hand. "Best decision I ever made. Second best." She squeezed his fingers. "The best was asking me to stay." "True." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Though really, you decided to stay before I ever asked." "Maybe." Her eyes sparkled. "But you still had to ask." They continued into the schoolhouse, into the life they had built, surrounded by students and colleagues and the deep satisfaction of work well done. And Kieran thought about that moment so many years ago when a stranger had pressed against his back and changed everything. He had been doing it wrong, she had said, but they had spent a lifetime proving how right they could make it together.